Hey photographer, if you pay people in your business at any point, this episode is for you. Think second shooters, editors, hair and makeup artists, virtual assistants, a business coach, even rent for studio or workspace, and attorney fees, just to name a few. And if you're already feeling a little tense, take a breath. If W-9s and 1099s still confusing, that's okay. It just means no one ever broke this down for you in plain English, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Before we talk about forms, we need to talk about classification, because this part actually matters more than you realize. There are very specific rules by the IRS around who can be a contractor and who must be treated as an employee. You don't get to just decide, oh, I'm going to pay this person as a contractor. I know a lot of people think that, and I actually see why. I get it. But classification isn't a preference. It's based on guidelines. The IRS looks at things like who controls how the work is done, who sets the schedule, whether the work is ongoing, and whether this person is actually running their own independent business and contracting with you versus working for you. Employees and contractors are treated very differently for tax purposes, and they're paid differently. If someone should have been treated as an employee, but you were paying them as a contractor instead, that can come back to you as the business owner in the form of back payroll taxes, penalties, and interest. So this isn't nitpicky, this is protective. Let's ground this in something familiar. When you onboard an employee, they fill out something called a W-4. You probably remember this from a past job when you worked for someone else. The W-4 collects their legal personal information, their full name, their social security number, and it also tells the employer how much federal tax to withhold from each paycheck, based on how the employee fills out the form. That's payroll. Contractors don't fill out a W-4, they fill out a W-9. And this is where people start mixing things up because W-9 and 1099 does sound familiar, but they do two very different jobs. Let's slow down and talk about what the W-9 actually does, because this is more than just a form you collect and file away. When a W-9 is filled out and signed, it's documentation. This person is operating as a contractor. It's not a replacement for a contract. I want to be clear about this, but it is part of the paper trail that supports the relationship. Ideally, you should also have an actual contract in place with contractors, and that contract should cover the scope, payment terms, and expectations. The W-9 supports the tax side. The contract supports the working relationship, and you want both. From a tax perspective, the W-9 is how you collect the legal personal information you need. The way the W-9 is filled out, the name, the business structure, and the tax ID tell you whether you need to track payments to this person at all. So how the W-9 is filled out matters because it dictates what we do on the back end. If the W-9 tells you you do need to track payments, great. You already have everything you need if you meet the filing threshold by the end of the year. And if it tells you you don't need to track payments, also great. You've got your bases covered and the proof to back it up. If the IRS ever audited you, you can show exactly why you didn't track or file a 1099 based on how the W-9 was filled out. I show you exactly how to interpret the W-9 inside the W-9 1099 workshop so you know exactly what you're looking at. And I'll give you a little more details about that workshop here at the end of the episode. Once you know you do need to track payments, there's another layer to be aware of, because it also matters how you pay them. Some payments get tracked, some don't. Venmo personal accounts, PayPal friends and family, or a Venmo business account, or PayPal business account, ACH, checks, credit card, they're all handled differently. We break this down in detail again inside the workshop, but here's my simple advice. Pay a contractor the same way every time. Consistency alone makes tracking cleaner and reporting much easier. Now we can talk about 1099s. Quick fun fact though, did you know the IRS actually has 21 different 1099 forms? They cover everything from interest income to dividends to canceled debt. But the good news is, in your photography business, you really only need to care about 3. The 1099 NEC, that stands for non-employee compensation. This is the form used for contractors, second shooters, editors, VAs, business coaches, anyone you pay for a service. This became the primary contractor form starting in 2020. Then you have the 1099 miscellaneous you might be more familiar with. This is used for things like rent and certain legal payments. And it used to be the only 1099 form we really had to worry about. Then you have the 1099K. This one is issued by third-party payment processors like PayPal, Venmo, or Stripe. You may actually receive several of these in January each year because the IRS requires those platforms to report how much you processed in payments through it. Those 1099Ks are primarily for your information. They're the IRS saying, here's what the payment processor says you processed. Your job is to make sure that everything they report is also being reported as income on your profit and loss. Not some of it, not most of it, all of it. Now let me explain exactly what the 1099 is for. This is the piece that ties everything together. When you file a 1099, that information goes to the IRS. The IRS then uses it to cross-reference income. They check to make sure the person you paid is also reporting that income on their tax return. That matching happens by tax ID or social security number, which is why having a correctly completed W-9 matters so much. This also ties directly to your tax return, no matter how you file. So whether you file a Schedule C as a sole proprietor or an 1120S as an S Corp or a 1065 as a partnership, every one of those returns asks the same core questions. Did you make payments that would require 1099s? And you answer yes or no. If you answer yes, there's a follow-up question. Were those 1099s filed or will they be filed on time? You also have to answer yes or no to this. And those answers matter because when you answer yes, yes, you're telling the IRS, I understand the rules and I followed them. And if you answer yes, but didn't actually file the forms, that's where you've opened yourself up to the IRS. So be careful. The IRS can disallow the expenses entirely because you were not W-9 and 1099 compliant. And if you've been in my orbit for a while, you knew this was coming. I will always find a way to tie it back to bookkeeping because bookkeeping matters. Not because it's exciting, but because it gives you clarity. And clarity is what keeps this stuff from turning into chaos later. So having clean, up-to-date bookkeeping and tracking all of this stuff is going to make your life so much easier when you follow a process from the get-go. One of the biggest mistakes I see photographers make every single year is not collecting the W-9 up front. You pay first, then you chase paperwork later. Emails, follow-ups, awkward messages, all of this goes away when this becomes part of your onboarding process. Before payment, contract is signed, W-9 is completed and signed every time. So what about the due dates? Well, W-9s are collected before you ever pay someone, so we're clear on that. I think I've said it like 6 times in this already. So there's not really a due date, but I'd want you to think of it as a due date is like before I pay them, we get the W-9. 1099s are due to the contractor by January 31st for the prior year's payments. This will change year to year. If the 31st lands on a weekend, it will be the following Monday usually, so just make sure you check the schedule each season. Now, I've touched on thresholds a few times, so let's dig into that a little further. When we talk about thresholds, we're talking about the dollar amounts that trigger reporting. And this is where a lot of confusion comes from because the IRS has been changing 1099 reporting thresholds across the board, not just for 1099Ks, but also for 1099 NEC and 1099 miscellaneous reporting. And the reason isn't random. The IRS is trying to get more visibility into self-employed income and small business payments. A lot of money flows outside of traditional payroll, and this is how they track it to make sure people are paying taxes. So over the last several seasons, we've seen threshold changes, rules shift, and timelines move, in some cases more than once, and in the same filing season. As of the time of this recording, there are current thresholds in place for 2025 and proposed changes already outlined for 2026. But this part is really important. These numbers are not set in stone. They've changed before, and they can change again, sometimes right before a filing deadline. So instead of memorizing numbers, what actually matters is understanding which payments are trackable, which form applies, and how to stay compliant, even when the rules move. And again, we cover the current thresholds, what applies to your business, how to handle the changes inside the workshop, so you're not guessing. Now, I have to share with you the biggest question I hear every single 1099 season, and maybe you've experienced it yourself, or maybe you're wondering it right now. What if they won't give me a W-9? Well, the IRS, again, has rules around this. The IRS requires contractors to provide a W-9 when requested. It is not optional. If they refuse, there are rules around something called 24% backup withholding. Here's what that means. If a contractor won't give you a W-9, the IRS says you're technically required to withhold 20% of what you pay that contractor and send that money to the IRS on their behalf. Not as a penalty, but as a way for the IRS to make sure their taxes are eventually paid. So they're having you withhold the taxes off the money. So if you pay someone $1,000 and they refuse to provide a W-9, you're supposed to only pay them $760 and remit the other $240 to the IRS with something called a Form 945. And yeah, you can see this can get messy fast. Most photographers don't want to be in the business of withholding taxes from contractors, which again is why you need to collect the W-9 up front before you ever pay anyone. If someone won't provide required tax documentation, I would stop working with them immediately. They're non-compliant, and you don't want their non-compliance becoming your problem. And again, I walk through all this entire situation step by step inside the workshop, including how to handle refusals and what to do before it even gets to this point. So this is how we handle with our monthly clients. As soon as our client is working with somebody, a contractor, or even planning to, they send us the name and the email. We send an electronic W-9 request on their behalf, which we show you how to do inside the workshop. We collect it, we review it, we document it before payment. No W-9, no payment. No matter when you're listening to this, know that compliance isn't a one-time thing. And I've mentioned the workshop a few times in this episode, so as promised, I'm going to give you some of the details. Inside the W-9 1099 workshop, we walk through collecting W-9s electronically, interpreting the information on them, filling them out correctly, because you may have them requested of you from people who are contracting you as a second shooter, etc. We talk about tracking payments properly, which ones you track, because if you're paying them with different payment sources, some of them will be tracked, some of them won't. How to handle refusals. We have templates in there for requesting W-9s, for explaining to contractors why you need to do that to use in your onboarding packages. I also walk you through how to file your 1099s electronically online step by step, so you can be completely compliant, done, and filed when you enroll in the W-9 1099 workshop. You can find it at, stick with me for this long one, bastionaccounting.com, W-9-1099-workshop, or in the show notes, or hop on over to bastionaccounting.com and you'll see a link to go to the workshop. Okay, my friend, that was a lot, but I hope it gave you clarity around working with contractors and what it really means to get and stay compliant. And if you're feeling like you need a little more support or a little more clarity, I invite you to join us inside the W-9 1099 workshop, where we can walk through all of this together step by step. And here's what I want you to take away from today. You don't need to know everything. You just need clarity around what actually impacts your business. When you have that clarity, you stop reacting, you stop scrambling, and you stop second-guessing yourself. And you get to focus on the work you actually love. Okay, photographer, I'm here to remind you, you can lean into your creative passion, run a profitable, sustainable, compliant business that supports your ideal life. Those two things can absolutely coexist, and I'm here to show you how. No more starving artist energy around here. I'll see you next time.